Hi everyone, this is Tyler Constable with Avantra, and welcome to the Business Services Training video. And here we're going to take a look at how to set up a business service, maybe identifying a business process within your environment, and taking a look at all the technical checks underneath that can occur, whether it's an SAP thing or a non-SAP check, and being able to put it all together in a single pane of glass.
When logging in to Avantra, to go and review your business services, you can select the Monitoring Business Services Overview, and here you'll see the different business services that you've already set up. These could be for month-end processing, where we're going to look at individual batch jobs, make sure that they're running okay. It could be, in this case here, a manufacturing landscape. It could even be used from a technical standpoint, where we're going to look at, system load, prevent shutdowns. The audit, if you're familiar with Avantra's automation procedures, to shut things down. So as you can see, how this works is there's an overarching process, and then there are sub-processes, which are these boxes. Each sub-process is built on top of these little balls, and each little ball is a check. So that could be a custom check or a native check, any kind of check within Avantra. So now you can start to take all of these different things that we've been covering in our training sessions, right? So maybe it's custom checks where looking at certain IDOCs, or maybe you're looking at certain messages that are going outbound, and if they're not behaving correctly, what does that mean for a certain business process? Maybe it's just something simple as maybe looking at memory and CPU of a certain server, right? All of those different components eventually roll up to a process that the business is using, or that any team is really using. This can be really used however you want it to be used. So there's a lot of different things you can do here. So what I'm going to first start out to build out is just an example business process. So to build one out, we're going to go to our configuration dropdown and select business services. We're going to select new, and let's just call this our month-end process. And we'll just select customer, select create. So you'll see 3 new tabs have opened up. Here you can see our input scope is for this particular customer. We're going to assign this to the customer, and why that's important is for things like notifications and dashboarding, things of that nature, where you may be restricted to certain customers. So if you're a managed service provider, we need to make sure that certain customers can only see their things, right? If you're an enterprise, you may be using these different customers to group your different systems. And then what doesn't come here, but it's required, is a system role. Again, so we need to make sure that if it's production-based, that we're using production criteria against notifications and dashboarding and all that stuff, right? So we need to make sure we select the correct system role. And then we can also look to see, do we want to record this for SLR reports? So if you're familiar with service level reports, do you want these to be, the timings to be all in there, so on and so forth. Next, you'll see the design tab. This is where we're going to spend most of our time designing. So there's a couple different sections that are important. So first is our main business service box over here on the right-hand side. There's currently nothing here except for something that says business service month-end processing. So this is what we just built out here. And this is where we're going to kind of map out whatever that process is. On the left-hand side, you'll see our toolbox, which have different selection criterias and functions. Now, these functions are going to be what make those boxes, these boxes, stay green, yellow, or red. So if we start with something called like all okay, that means everything is going to be okay. One okay means just one thing out of the group. So of all the checks, if there's 10 checks, if just one of them goes into okay status, that means something. Worst case scenario means if just one thing out of this group goes into a scenario, it's going to turn into whatever status we want. Espresso, where we start to look at we can take different percentages, essentially, like, if we've got 10 different performance metrics, maybe 1 or 2 of them doesn't matter, but if 7 out of the 10 go into critical status or warning status, then we know something is occurring. So you can do things like that in that nature as well. You can script it out and you can delete as well. The last section down here is our input. So this is going to be kind of those little checks that are going to make up these boxes. So the toolbox is kind of the box. The input system checks are the individual like little balls here. So here you can see this is our toolbox, and each of these little checks under here is the criteria that we searched for down here in the system and checks input. So the first thing we need to do for this example, I'm going to start off with a worst, meaning that if just one thing goes into critical status, it's going to turn into a critical status. So I click and drag it and hold it, and I move it on top of the business service month end. So here is the worst case scenario. I'm going to select it once. Let's just call this month end, and I'll select apply. So what I've just done here is created the overarching box here. It's the overarching scenario here. If any of these things, essentially by worst case scenario, what I mean by that is if any of these boxes that we're about to build out go into a critical status, the overarching process is going to go into red. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, we actually have one of those that's in red right now. You select here, you can see this particular box, something has gone red, therefore the overarching process has gone red. So back here, that's what I've just created here. So now I need to take another toolbox function and put it within here to fill out the first box. So I'm going to take the espresso and I'm going to drag it on top of this box here because it's going to be reliant on this box. I'll drop it here. And let's say for this case scenario, I need to make sure that there are, server metrics of a third-party system. Maybe there's some kind of manufacturing or maybe there's a financial software, right? So financial software that's non-SAP in this example, right? So financial software, and I'm gonna come over here now to my input, and I'm gonna select the server. So let's say this particular server here is the server that does not, that has to be up and running, but it's not SAP related. So I'm just gonna say, all right, so this for it to work well, I need to make sure that the agent is alive, obviously. So I'm just gonna click it, drag it, and move it into this espresso box here. I need to make sure that CPU is okay. I need to make sure that file systems are okay and that memory is okay. All right, so I'm going to now select my mapping rules here. So essentially, if just one of these things goes into critical status, maybe not a big deal. But if 3 out of these 4 things go into critical status, then I have a problem, right? Maybe I know that if CPU, file systems, and memory are all having a problem, this software is probably having a problem. So I'm going to say, all right, so if 3 more or 3 greater than or equal to 3 things go into critical status, this is going to be in critical status. So I'll select apply here. Now I have my first box. So in this example, it says system health, but it will actually say financial software. Now let's say we've got a scenario where we need to also add some SAP metrics. So I'm going to take the SAP metrics. I'm going to use another espresso for this one as well. I'm going to drag it, and I'm going to be sure to drag it under that overarching process again. So again, this is the overarching one here. So now I'm going to have 2 boxes. I got my overarching process and the 2 sub-processes. Again, overarching process, 2 sub-processes. And for this one, perhaps we have some SAP-based checks. So let's say we just need some BW systems. We just say our team is working on something, and we know that there are specific, not even specific, just generic SAP health. So we need to know that dialogue performance is okay. So I'm going to click and drag it over here. I want to make sure that that the HANA CPU is okay. Click and drag that, move it right over here as well. And let's say we've got some, we need to make sure that lock tables are okay as well. And let's also add that there's not a lot of short dumps and that there's some spools. So in this next box, this is going to be some pretty generic SAP checks. Essentially, is the underlying system pretty healthy? So I'm going to select my espresso here. I'm just going to say ECC system health. And let's say now in this case scenario, I always want to make sure I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that if 2 or more of them are in critical status, then I want to know about it. Then there's a problem. Right? So now I'm going to say, all right, if 2 of these 5 things go, this particular box is going to go into red status which means the month end is going to go into red status. So I'll easily know. Now, let's say the last thing here we want to look at is we're going to do a worst case scenario for this one. And let's start to map out some specific things, right? So this is now using custom checks. Maybe there's some custom checks around. Are there certain batch jobs, are they running long? If you're familiar with all of the different custom checks, this becomes very, very powerful. Our BW uploads running longer than normal, our batch jobs are running longer than normal, our messages still healthy. So a lot of different things that can go here. So for this example here, I'm just going to say worst case scenario. And again, I'm going to move it to the month end box, the overarching, because I'm going to make another sub process. See, I now have my third. And in this case scenario, I can go out and select some specific some specific custom checks. Now we're going to go to the server or the system or the database where it is. In this example here, we're going to use RIE production again. And in this case example, let's say we've got, some specific long running jobs, so on and so forth, right? So we can just click and drag it over. Maybe we've got some other custom checks, around health of, can we talk to a certain bank interface, so on and so forth, right? So whatever the custom checks that you've got in here, you can start to add those. So just for example's sake here, I'm just going to grab a couple things just for fun, but these can all be custom jobs that are specific to this overarching process. So in here, I'm going to call this our specific month-end jobs, month-end processes. I'm going to select apply. Now, if I wanted to see the source code of all this, I can select the source here, and I'll get the source code of everything that we're looking at. Here, I'm going to go back to the design. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to set it as active as well. So it says now my business service is active. It's important to note when you first come into our business services, so again, I can go to our monitoring, business services, so I can select my business services tab. I'll click close out of it here, go back into it. You see our month-end process. There's the one we just created. It's currently in red status. So let's take a look. So you can see here pretty easily that the month-end process is probably not going to do well. And here are the three sub-processes we just built out. The financial software system, a third-party system, let's call it, working pretty good, right? It looks like the underlying system's all okay. Everything's good there. The SAP system itself, though, is having some problems. We've got some lock tables, we've got a lot of short dumps, we've got some spool problems. That may mean some performance-based problems for these specific month-end processes. So you can see some month-end processes. In this example, TRFC in isn't working okay, right? But that could be various different things built with our custom checks. So you can now very easily take any kind of process. Again, it could be technical process, a business process, it could be anything at all. Map those underlying checks into groups that roll up into the overarching group, which is your process, all within a couple minutes. And one last thing is we'll add it to our dashboard as well. So we'll select our monitoring dashboards. I'm going to select new here just to create a business service dashboard. And actually, I'll just leave this open here. And if you're familiar with the dashboarding capabilities, you see our add dashlet. And in here, we have a couple different things. We've got a business service status, business service details, and way on the bottom here, we have our business service node. So let's take a look at what those are. So the first off, we've got our business service status. Here we've got our business services, and we're going to select our, oops, oh, that keeps happening there. System start and stop detector, and we can actually show the background color in the color. We'll do grid width, grid height, do OK. So this is the overarching process essentially, right? So this is essentially the whole process here. I think the one we just selected was start and stop detector. So it's looking at the overarching process. We'll know if it's red or not. We can do another add dashlet here, and this time let's select the business service details. So we can select that same one. Oops. Okay, just select the month-end process here and select, I'm going to make this grid width height. Let's go 2, select apply, and now we can actually see the overarching process, and each sub-process as well. And lastly, and I can actually change this. This I probably don't need to. Let's go to 1 here. And lastly, we select the add dashlet, and let's go down here to our business service node. Let's select add. Let's do our our month-end process again. And now I can actually select one of those, right, if I wanted to. So I can select the whole thing. In this case, remember we built out that financial software. I'm just going to say this, select apply, and now I can see the individual. So essentially we can go from a high level down to the high level with each individual box, each individual sub-process, all the way down to each sub-process and what's involved in each sub-process. So this becomes very, very valuable. You could also add arrows as well if you so choose. So you can actually, let's say we wanted to add another sub-process. So the financial software, if you remember, was our first one. And then we can do a symbol, and let's just add a right arrow. We'll select apply. Not the best looking here. We can probably change that around a little bit, but that's okay for this example. And now I'm going to go back down and add another business service node. And this time I'm going to select our month-end process again. And now I'm going to select our ECC system health. Select apply. So I can start to see I can map out the whole process with different arrows and kind of see how that whole process looks. You can do something similar. So this is the manual way, which is very nice. You could also select when you're in the business service that we just created, there's a little create dashboard button here. Select that, and you can actually easily create where Avantra is going to create the dashboard for you. So this could be a month-end process. I prefer the layout to go horizontally, but you can also select the whole background color, so on and so forth. And what this ends up looking like in our dashboards is our business process. And essentially, Avantra will map out the whole process. Now we changed the background color, and this one it'll actually map out the whole process as we see fit as well. So a couple different ways you can map it to a dashboard. So in this Mastering Avantra session, we covered business service monitoring with a quick overview. We did a setup of a 3 sub-process overarching process, and then we added it to a dashboard manually and also through an automatic dashboard creation as well.